Hello, everyone. My name is Katy of Greenland Quilter, and welcome to the premiere of my interview podcast with Emily. So I'm going to turn it over to her. She's going to tell you who she is, talk about her channel a little bit, and then we'll get started with the interview. So go ahead, Emily.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily, and my channel is called Terribly Rad. It's kind of a name that I started using when my friend and I were going to do stuff in college and just never changed it. But here we are, and it's kind of turned into a quilty venture. I started my YouTube journey officially in 2021. I challenged myself to do a new quilt every 2 weeks. So I made 26 quilts in the year 2021 from start to finish. And I've kind of just been having a blast and going ever since. So I guess that makes this year three, year four. I don't even know anymore, but I've been having a great time and have been loving to get to know the YouTube quilty community in addition to other social media networks as well.
That's outstanding. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, who influenced you to learn how to sew, and how long have you been sewing? And can you describe your learning process as you were learning?
So I have always been around sewists in my family. Both of my grandmas sewed, my great grandma sewed and crocheted. My dad even sewed, so he made puppets. My mom did our clothes and costumes when we were a kid. My mom's mom was the quilter in the family. And then later on, my cousin from my dad's side and I both eventually got into sewing ourselves. I took my first sewing class in a kids can sew class. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And it was just something that my mom had signed me up for because she didn't want to teach me how to sew. It's probably easier when you're not teaching your own kids. And so she signed me up for that while my brother was taking piano lessons. And I made a couple different things, some bags, a quilt, Beanie Baby clothes, because I was growing up in the 90s. So that was the
Oh,
craze then. And I've just been, my learning process kind of came and went. Like I did a little bit when I was taking the classes, and then I didn't really pick it back up again consistently until probably my junior or senior year of high school when I decided I was going to make a t-shirt quilt for whatever reason. And then it kind of dipped back off once I graduated. And then I would say it's probably been the last 16 or 17 years that I've consistently been sewing and quilting. That's kind of where I found that quilting was my jam. And I've kind of been some things I'll figure out by reading books and figure and asking questions. Other things I'll dive on in by the seat of my pants and figure it out the hard way, like foundation paper piecing. I decided I was going to make one practice block before diving into this super complex design, but I've fallen in love with it and it's been a journey and it's been fun the whole time.
that's a great answer. What are your favorite genres of fabric?
I love Moda Grunge. That's pretty much my go-to. If I need something for a project, I always head to the grunge section first. My cousin was the one that introduced me to it. And then every time I mentioned it, my dad would just be like, what are you talking about? What is grunge fabric? Thinking it was like holes in it and worn up. And I was like, no, it's just kind of has that distressed look, but I like fabrics that read like a solid.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm also a sucker for cute novelty prints. Like, I inherited this from my mom. I'm a collector of cat fabric. That's one of my main things that I'll look for when I go into a store. Like if I'm out of town, that's my souvenir shopping. I'll look for some kind of cat prints or dinosaurs or something fun and kind of goofy or quirky and um, things that can get fussy cut and that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. Um, who is your favorite fabric designer and or pattern designer?
I don't know if I follow fabric designers too much as far as like the ones throughout. I know I've found some basic gray that I like and little bits here and there. I don't really find myself being a true like loyalist to any certain specific designer, but as far as patterns go, I am a sucker for an Elizabeth Hartman pattern. When we get to my show and tell portion today, that you're gonna see how much of a sucker I am for it. I just love the tiny little pieces and how they really are just kind of start off as squares and rectangles and turn into some stinking cute little things.
Yep. Are you more of a traditional or modern quilt maker, or do you lean in the middle of it?
I I I thought I was more of a modern because I was like, I'm in the Modern Quilt Guild and I do all these modern things and I like modern this, but I think I'm kind of a blend. I do still stick to kind of the structure and like design of more traditional quilts where they're very in rows, but then sometimes I'll kind of throw in a modern element like using a non-traditional background color, like using like a yellow or like a dark teal or something just to kind of shake it up from being just your standard traditional looking quilt and kind of add a little bit of edge to it.
Okay, that's a great answer. As a quilter, is there anything you have learned that you wish someone would have told you in the beginning?
Um, Probably the thing I'm learning now that as I'm going through some of my older fabric stash is to maybe pick up a few blenders along the way. I like my problem was when I first started getting into sewing and stuff, I would buy the novelty prints, like anything Disney or big characters and cute stuff like that. And as I'm going through it now, going trying to use stuff up for different charity quilts, that's what I'm having to purchase to kind of fill things out is the blender or something to break it up or give it a little bit of variation to that. So yes, it's okay to collect the fun prints, but also consider adding a little bit of things to tone it down in your stash as well. So that's what I'm kind of figuring out on my own right now.
Tell us about what you envisioned in the beginning of your quilt journey that has evolved over time.
Um, when I did my senior project in high school, that's what we one of our requirements to graduate, and I said I wasn't going to make quilts. So I went from somebody who's saying I'm not going to make quilts, that's not what I'm going to do, and here I am, and that's all I do. So it's been a complete 180 from that, and I kind of started off also just kind of making quilts for anybody and everybody, and which I feel there's still a place for that, but also not having to feel like I need to bend over backwards and put that much like there's only so many people that you know that you can gift quilts to, but I think kind of feeling like you're not overdoing it, like overdoing yourself, like putting too much pressure on it. Like I still want quilting to be fun and I still want to enjoy it. And I think not feeling like, oh, I have to do a quilt. Oh, I have to do a quilt. Oh, I have to do a quilt. That's kind of something that I'm kind of learning more so now that I don't have to do as much as I would love to do a quilt for everybody. I don't have to, or I don't need to.
Why do you make quilts, and what does quilting give back to you?
So I make quilts because they don't have zippers and sleeves. That's that was kind of my, when people ask me, oh, do you make any clothes? I make maybe my Halloween costume each year, and that and pajama pants are the extent of my clothing repertoire, really. Like I could read a pattern, I could figure that out, but something about making quilts and just the feeling of being wrapped in a quilt, like if you cuddle up with it and not like I love a good minky backed quilt. That's kind of what I've kind of transitioned into putting on a lot of the backs of my quilts. And just that feeling of just being wrapped in a hug. So I've kind of, especially over the last couple years, and dealing with a lot of grief with my own personal experiences as well as my friends around me, I've been able to kind of hone in on those ones that I feel I'm not a huggy, touchy feely kind of person, but especially with my close friends that I know need something in these moments, I feel like quilting has kind of given me the ability to give them that hug that they need and that soft warmth that they deserve.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, what do you like best about making a quilt, and what do you love doing the most? And what I mean by that is it piecing, binding, quilting? What is your jam?
I feel like the piecing is what really excites me, seeing the squares and rectangles and shapes like that transform into the block that they're supposed to be. Especially when it comes to those Elizabeth Hartman patterns, and you're like, how is this collection of oddball shapes supposed to turn into this whale or this bear?
Yeah.
And kind of that transition to that. And I love the quilting part too, because it kind of just that's the moment where you kind of see that it's like, oh, this is almost done, and that excitement, um, that kind of you're over the hill and like we're almost there, and kind of that downhill like slide into home.
Okay, what is your favorite type of quilt to make and why? Is it applique, piecing, whole cloth?
Um, I do piecing primarily. I've tried applique a little bit, and I just couldn't get the feel for it. Um, and I'm kind of between your standard piecing and foundation paper piecing. Those are the two that are kind of my big happy places, is when I'm feeling like I want to challenge myself or do something a little extra out there, I'll do something foundation paper pieced. But I love a good pieced quilt. I love those pieces just falling into place.
What is the hardest thing about creating a quilt from your perspective?
I think the hardest part, for the most part, um, is getting the fabric pull to feel like just right. I'm doing a bunch of Christmas quilts right now for my husband's college friends. And I think the hardest part, like I picked out all the pre-cuts. That's what we're doing. We're just pre-cuts, layer cakes, and jelly rolls, and picking like the right background color or the right like accent color has been harder than it should be. And I feel like once you get that fabric pull all together and you can kind of see it when it all cuts out, it's kind of like that. Okay, this is gonna be good. I did what I needed to do. I did the right decision. So
How do you decide what pattern you're going to make?
usually I just happen upon the pattern first and go, I really like this. And then if I don't already have it, I have a Dropbox folder. If it's a digital pattern, that I'll just keep everything in. Otherwise, if it's flipped and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a quilt for this person, I'll start with my Dropbox folder and kind of scroll through and see what I've impulse bought, because that's what I'm a sucker for. And flip through and see, okay, this kind of feels like their style, and they kind of feel like more modern, or maybe they're more traditional, or maybe they would like this more cutesy kind of style, and kind of feel off what their vibe is, and then start building from there.
So let's dig a little deeper. What do you when you're getting ready to decide you're going to make another quilt? Um, are you making your quilt from fabric that you bought without having a pattern in mind? And I'll give you an example. I buy fabric before I even think about what I'm going to make it into. What do you do?
I would say see all the above. I've done both, where have if I have a pattern in mind or a person in mind, I'll start from there and go, okay, this is what they like. Like, I mean, not everyone's gonna like my cat and dinosaur stash that I've got going on. But if I'm doing something for me or something for a close friend of mine, or just like charity quilts, like a lot of the 3 yard quilts, I'll start with the stash that I have and see what I can kind of work from. And then see what I need to build out from there, especially when I look at it and go, okay, how much yardage do I need? Or does it pre-cuts? What do I have in this kind of shape and size? And um, or I'll find pre-cuts on sale and stash those up and go, okay, it's time to do something with these. What do I have? How do I want to use it? What else do I need?
Okay, that's a great answer. How many quilts have you made or do you have?
I at one point I did a tally. This was probably, I think it was about 3 years ago because somebody asked me the same thing. And I probably at that point had about 150 that I had ever done. And I
Wow.
feel like it's safe to say that it's probably at least doubled. Because I did a lot of 3 yard quilts last year for different charity stuff. And then just in 2021 alone, I made 26 different quilts just to kind of challenge myself and whether it was a charity quilt or donated to somebody. So in my house, I probably have 30, like just from my stack alone next to me, I probably have about 12, 13 there. And like I'm looking around
Nice.
my room and I can see some over there. And I know there's like 5 out in the living room. So it's a very quilty house that I live in.
Do you name your quilts when you make them?
I don't. I just kind of resonate with them being like, this is this pattern and I use this fabric. I haven't really gotten into naming things. Like I know a lot of people name their sewing machine too, and mine's just Janome.
Yeah, it already has a name. Why give it
I
another
know
name?
it came with a name.
Yeah, it came with a name, so why change that? I agree with you on that. I've never heard of people taking inanimate objects and giving them uh living person's names.
Right.
It's pretty interesting that they do that. The other thing I wanted to ask about is when you finished your quilt, or right before you finish it, or in the process of getting ready to quilt it, do you also put a label on the back of your quilt or on the front of it?
I put a label on the back right now. Let's see if I've got one here. Yes, I do. So right now I've got these little
Oh, those are
handmade by
cute.
Emily tags that a friend of mine designed for me. And so that's what I've been putting on there. I know in QuiltCon 2022, I think, I went to a lecture that was all about labeling quilts and I found it very interesting because I can't remember who it was, but she talked about including more information on your labels than just like to Ellie from Emily and like the
Yeah,
year, because then should that quilt ever get away from who it's supposed to belong to, like one, it's kind of a better chance of finding its way back home. But then if it ever ends up in a museum, then it has all this extra information on it that they can add and kind of catalog and stuff. And so I've kind of thought about that. I don't have an embroidery machine or anything to like stitch out my own labels currently, and I'm happy with just having my little one, but I feel like in someday down the future, if I want things to be more cataloged, I guess,
yeah,
then I may consider doing and including more information onto those kind of things and kind of giving them their own little story on the back or something.
yep. I agree with you on that. What is your go-to thread?
I pretty much use two threads depending on what I'm doing. For my piecing, I use Aurifil a lot. Um, I know it's pricier, which is unfortunate, but my machines really like it, and it's a good solid cotton thread. And then for my long arm, I use Glide. So it's 40 weight polyester. It comes in a whole crazy rainbow of colors that I hadn't had any issues trying to find a good match for.
Hmm.
And it's a good cost, so it's a good price. And I haven't had any bad results with either of those threads.
That's really good. What is your go-to sewing machine?
I have a brand new Janome 9480. So I got it a couple months ago and we are still getting to know each other, but so far the result is great. I had my previous Janome, it was a DC 2010. It's still here. I did not disown it. I had it, it was my 21st birthday gift from my parents. And so it's still going strong. It's now kind of been resorted to a travel machine. And it's beautiful, it's teal, it's cute. And both of them have kind of, when I was looking at a new machine and I already knew Janome was great, I love it. And the 9480 so far has been amazing.
Awesome. Do you have well, you've mentioned you have two machines. Is two the how many you have, or do you have more than that?
I just I only have two.
Okay.
Besides my long arm. So I know people that have a machine for every step of the process. I have a couple friends at work that talk about how many machines they have and that kind of thing. And so I just have only had the two. So now I feel good about having a backup machine should anything happen to one or the other and need to go in for servicing. Because that was always the issue was if I needed to get it serviced, I wouldn't be able to sew anything. But now I have that security of having still being able to sew while one is at the spa.
Yep. When we go to Denmark in January, he told me we can buy me another machine because I only have this one. I mean, I have that singer talent, but there's no way in heck I'll ever go back to that one. Yeah, no, thank you, Joe. But I'm gonna buy another Janome. I want an M8, but we'll see. It'll either be an M8 or another one of these, or maybe a straight stitch Janome. I haven't decided.
Mhm.
What kind of long arm machine do you have?
I have a Cunique 21X Elite. So it is from the Grace Company. They're based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And I hadn't known the machine prior to working at Cali Quilt Co., which is the shop here in town. And before that, I had only ever rented and used Gamels and knew I was like, I will never own one of these because that's more than a car and probably my kidney. Um, and so I got to know these machines and they're great. And the robotic software that I have on it is amazing. It's very straightforward. It's very user friendly and it's been great. I got it paid off real quick and we're looking to get started on having a official long arm business here at home. My husband and I are getting that all geared up and that's going to be our next venture that we start adding in.
Congratulations on that. That's awesome. When me and my husband did the Florida Hop Shop, we did 45 shops, and I saw so many different brands of long arms that were being used, and some of them.
Hmm.
I'm bringing this up because we're going to talk about the Gamel for a minute. Man, I saw some Gamels that looked like they were ancient, and every one of those Gamels I saw, they were beast of machines. My goodness. Some of
Hmm.
them had racks on them like 15 feet wide, and
Yeah,
I don't know
they're
how
big.
long the necks was on them, but they were massive. And,
Yeah,
this one shop had four of them, and every one of them were
it's
being used.
crazy.
It was crazy. And I also saw a couple of machines I had never heard of them, but now I don't remember what they were. But I just didn't realize there were so many different manufacturers of long arms.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was a very good learning thing for me. Okay. What other hobbies do you dabble in and do you spend as much time on them?
So I have been a dancer since I was three. I grew up at the same dance studio, eventually started teaching there as well. And I have taken a little hiatus from it currently since getting married last year, just trying to settle into married life and figuring out what life looks for like for us now. So tap dancing was my favorite. I did even get on point shoes at one point in my life. So I've done ballet, tap, and jazz for at least 30 years. And then my other one that I kind of have on my side hobby is photography. So I actually have a bachelor's degree in photography.
Oh,
My
nice.
friends and I in high school were like, I want to major in electives. And so I feel like my life path has taken me to living in electives and having fun. And so I tried to push myself as a wedding photographer for a couple years, but then kind of took the back burner and I do it more hobby. So right now, like I still use my camera when I photograph all my quilts. And then I do a headshot and group photo for a local theater company with their youth productions here in town.
Hmm.
And so that's what I've kind of been doing, keeping photography being a hobby and involved still. And I think those are my main two. And I'll do a little cross stitch here and there. That's my other like handcraft kind of hobby. But between those three, I feel like I still spend more time doing quilting and that kind of stuff.
Okay, let's talk about your YouTube channel. When did you
Yeah.
start it? What were your goals in
So
the
I
beginning? And how has that
yeah.
changed over time?
So I officially started it in 2021 as a result of COVID. I was kind of I realized that I made a quilt top during like lockdown in March or April or whatever that was. And then I didn't actually quilt it until December. And it was a Christmas quilt for me. And so I was just like thinking about it and I was like, hey, I need to push myself and get things done like on a timely manner instead of just making all these quilt tops and just hanging them in my closet. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make a new quilt start to finish every 2 weeks because I took the year divided in half. So 26 quilts every 2 weeks in the year 2021. And I did it. Some weeks were a little more chaotic than others because I chose more complicated things. I really had no like specific theme in mind for like I was just gonna do this type of quilt or I was just gonna do this kind of thing. I did anything from a simple Villa Rosa pattern to an Elizabeth Hartman quilt to a tree skirt. Like I did a whole wide range of different things. And so that was kind of where I started and it kind of picked up a little bit. And I could say, okay, the next year, 2022, I didn't have a theme for it, I think, and I just kind of just did whatever. I did a quilt here, like I think I posted weekly still. Sometimes it would be the starting of a project, sometimes it would be finishing it. And then it didn't seem as cohesive. And so when it came to 2023, I was like, okay, I need to go back to a theme. And so I was thinking about it and I was like, well, it's 2023. I could do the year of the 3 yard quilts. And so that's where that came in. And so that's where I started working a lot from my stash and got a floor monster sneaking through. Um, and so I worked a lot from my stash and kind of took some of my bigger Disney prints to kind of break them down. And I did, I think I was doing almost weekly, like one quilt. I'd cut out a bunch, sew them all through, and the posting, I think I sewed it together one day, one video, and then at the end of the week was the quilting and finishing video. So I kept that theme through for the most part. And then coming to this year, I was my goal was to do I called it Scrappy New Year
Mhm.
um, because I was going to try and use up a lot of my scraps, and then my scrappiness just didn't quite happen like I wanted it to. So I've been kind of just dabbling here and there and doing different things and so my goal for next year is to get back on track and do that scrappy theme and kind of figure out some ways to play with it, especially with getting the long arming going and that kind of thing. But each year I've also done a set of Quiltmas videos. So I've done the 25 days of Quiltmas where it's all been different holiday projects or different breaking down one quilt into 4 different days, just so it's kind of like a little fun quilty short advent calendar for each day. So that's what I've been working on currently is getting those going.
What's the name of your channel so everybody knows?
My channel's name is Terribly Rad. So it's not specifically quilting related, but it's Terribly Rad.
Okay, what do you love most about you doing YouTube, and what do you dislike the most about it?
I think what I like most and least kind of sometimes play into each other. And it's the ability to interact with other quilters, whether they're local, because I know there's a lot of locals that will watch me as well, and they'll come into the shop and say hey and chat with me at my guild meetings about what I've been working on and that kind of thing. And then sometimes, like especially at the beginning, reading the section could be kind of hard at times, just because you want to be friends with everybody and you think the internet's great, and then sometimes the grumpy gills come out of people, and they like to have their opinions, and you just have to kind of keep it in mind that it's just their opinion, whether it's the way that you feel, or
Yeah.
whether they're right or wrong. And so I think the community has been great. 99% of the time I do get some of those grumblies out there, but we can't all have rainbows and sunshine. But um that's what I've really enjoyed, is just building community and getting to know other people, both stateside and across the sea.
That's awesome. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little break from talking, and I'm going to spotlight you so that you can share your quilts with us. So when you're sharing the quilt, tell us about the quilt and whatever information you want to give about it. And let's have a little mini trunk show.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So, kicking things off, I do have my very first quilt that I ever made. And it is this, I think it was a rail fence kind of pattern. So, this is what I made in my Kids Can Sew class when I was 7 or 8. Just three little fabrics. I was big into pigs. Like my aunt would give me a new one every so often, whether it was a stuffed animal or little figurines. I would never want to own a pig, but I just think little cartoony pigs are kind of the cutest little thing. And so it's still going strong. Like, it's got a few holes in it. It's not quilted, it's just tied with embroidery floss. So
Oh,
the
sweet.
quilting didn't actually come into play until well into years later, but it's still cute. I actually still have some of this fabric laying around somewhere. It's kind of it unearths itself every so often, but um oh, I've got to fix that hole there. But other than that, it's still a good little size and all sorts of cuteness. So that was my very first quilt. And then let's see what I've got. I've kind of got a mixed bag here. Um, let's see. Oh, Trixie, you gotta move. Okay, so oh, my pile just fell. So as far as Elizabeth Hartman patterns go, I think it was 2023 it was that I first discovered Elizabeth Hartman. It was on Instagram, and she had posted about doing this cat vent sew along. And what it was at that point, it was a free pattern still. I don't know if it still is. But every day in December, kind of like my quiltmas, she did a new. You did the one block, and then at the end, you'd have a 25 little block quilt.
Oh,
And so each cat is a different pattern. So their layout's different. And then these were all like batik scraps that I had for my grandma.
mhm.
And so I kind of figured out my layout based off of what colors I had more of, what I had less of, and kind of just build that from there. So I've got this little wall hanging um, that kind of turned into my first experience of Elizabeth Hartman. And then the next year, I can't remember if she did um, the pattern again herself, but you could either do 25 cats, or do four of each cat and you do 100. So I did it the following year with just for fun. So I did four of each cat block, and I've ended up with 100 cats on this quilt. My previous cat before I had Trixie, his name was Elroy, and he was a black and white cat, and he had a little pink nose. So anywhere that I had the ability to put a little pink square there to be his little nose, I did. So I probably got 8 or so little pink nose cats on there. And this one was a lot of fun to shop for, because I would just kind of go into a shop and see what their black on blacks were and what their white on whites were, and kind of go on a little treasure hunt to kind of see what fat quarters I could find to add to my collection. I think a couple of them even glow in the dark, which is kind of fun. Um, but that was kind of my beginning stages of my Elizabeth Hartman addiction. And then another thing that I really enjoy doing is when I go somewhere, that's how I souvenir shop. I feel like a lot of quilters can probably relate to that, as far as going, oh, well, I'm going to go visit this place. Where are the quilt shops nearby? So I have a friend that lives outside of Anchorage in Alaska. It's just about an hour out. And I've gone up there a couple times. And luckily, she sews herself. And my friend that I traveled with, her mom is a quilter. So I didn't feel super guilty about convincing them to go to quilt shops with me because they knew the drill. They knew who they brought with them. And so the first time I went, we went to these different shops, and then she was taking us back to the airport, and we went to this shop, and I was just like, "What do you guys have here that's like Alaska fabric? Like, what can I take home that I'm not going to find in California?" And I bought this fat quarter bundle that was all these batiks that had bears and fish and otter and
Oh, wow.
um, just all sorts of kind of Alaskan things, whether it's the way that the art's done on there or the specific animal. And so I bought the fat quarter bundle that year. And then, much like my other project buying, I didn't buy anything to finish the project. I didn't have a pattern. And so I went up again either the next year or the year after. And I looked at my fat quarter bundle and I went, what do I like? Let me find a pattern. Let me find so then I can go up there, take my fat quarter bundle, take my pattern information and go, okay, what do I need to finish this off? And so I got all the things that I needed. And so I bought my border and this like bubbly kind of crafting in there. And then the backing was my favorite because it was the cutest little print because it had all the otters on there. So that was all the otters.
Oh, I
And
like the back
my friend's
though.
husband took us out on the boat and we actually saw the wild otters out in the water. So I was like, perfect. It's very reminiscent of our time there. And now all I need to do is go up there again so then I can take a nice picture of my Alaska quilt in the Alaskan wilderness.
That's awesome.
So let's see what's next. This is actually one that was fun. My cousin and I were just talking about this because this one was a sew along that I did. The designer's name was Kid Giddy, and she posted that she was going to do a holiday sweater sew along. So it was a foundation paper piece pattern, and it's this little sweater, like ugly Christmas
Oh,
sweaters.
nice.
But at the time, I didn't feel like I wanted a Christmas quilt. I was like, I don't know, everyone's doing ugly sweaters. I don't want Christmas quilt. So what I did is I did all Disney fabric, which reminds me of like growing up in the 90s where they had like the
Yeah.
big obnoxious
Yep.
graphic prints on your sweaters. So I just kept making sweaters and it's this ended up being really big. But it lives on our bed every so often, like when we try and keep things like warm it up without having to turn the heat. And
That's
so
so
what I did is
cool.
I would you had to post your blocks for entries to for the giveaways and stuff. And so anytime that like I could like theme something, um I would like this one. I have a giant robot Buzz Lightyear that my friends gave me, and so I posed this block with it. And then I have my dad actually met Paul Winchell, the voice of Tigger, and so I posed my block with the little autographed Tigger that he has, and my I would pull out my Disneyland autograph book and like pair it up with them. And my cousin and I were just
What
talking
were
about
the
this because I
blocks?
think this was ah,
What size were the blocks?
these are I want to say they're like 6.5. They're not
Okay.
very big. And so what I ended up doing is instead of having them all pieced together, I have my block fell in plus signs
Yeah,
just to
that's
kind of
really
give it something a
cool.
little different. So, and I paired them all by color. So like there's a blue one, a yellow one, um, there's a green one. So I did my background because I think my background was just from scraps that I had.
Yeah.
And then I started to run out of certain colors of scraps um and just kind of figured out how many I had and tried to get them all laid out and figured out. And by the end, I was like, okay, I need this many blue ones, this many green ones. And I think it was because of having the extra fabric in there, the background. That's why it ended up being so big. But it is very cozy. It's just got a flannel backing,
Wow,
little
that's
Disney backing.
gorgeous.
And so that one, this one I did on, how did I quilt this? Oh, I did. Oh, that's right. I did this one on a rental and I did big pebbles.
Mm-hmm.
So they're probably like the size of like a 50-cent piece.
Yep.
And that took a long time to do, that's for sure.
That's pretty.
So there's that one. And then this one was a result of my first quilt con. I went and walked the trade show floor and fell in love with the Fabric Worm booth. They're based out of like Central California out here, and they are big on carrying birch fabrics. And so they also do a lot of the Charlie Harper. And so I fell in love with this cats and racks bundle. So it's all cat fabric and raccoon fabric um, from
Sweet.
different little like designs and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so they have this pattern in the booth, and it's Parallel Paths by So Brainy. And so this was my first experience sewing curves. And it was nice because it's just a slight curve on every, like almost like snowballing some of the corners.
Yep.
And so it just gave it enough to kind of give that look of a curve
Yep.
without committing to making like a full circle or anything. And I've done this pattern a couple times since and I've loved it. It's just if you have a big focal print that you don't want to cut down, it's perfect for that. And then this
Nice.
is a good lap size quilt. So it goes on the bed, it goes on the couch. Um, it's traveled with me because it's a good size to just throw in the car.
Yep.
Um, and so that was fun. It was my first foray into somebody told me if you fall in love with the fabric, just buy it. Like, don't have the regret of going back and it not being there. Like, if you see something you love, especially at QuiltCon or something like that, just buy the fabric. Like,
Yeah.
just do it. You're gonna regret it if you don't. And so I bought a fat quarter bundle and then I went back before the show was over to get the yardage because I was like, I'm gonna regret it if I don't do this. And then it sat around for a couple years before I actually made it, but at least I had everything that I needed to do
That's fantastic.
it. Okay. So speaking of my novelty collection, um, in I want to say this was 2018, I took a year-long like sew along class that was on the Fussy Cut Sampler book. Is that what this
Yeah.
is? 2018, yes. And so each month, there were 48 blocks in the class or in the book, and so she broke it down to 4 blocks each month, and then by the end, you'd have a sampler quilt that had different skills of fussy cutting and organizing and stuff. And so she strongly, she's like, pick a theme. It's going to make it easier, whether it's a color or an object or something that gives it a theme. Like a lot of people did Christmas or Halloween or florals or something. And so I was like, I'm going to do cats and dinosaurs. That's going to be my theme. And so that's what I did. So with the 4 blocks, I would do 1 block that was just cats, 1 block that was just dinosaurs, and then 2 blocks that have both in there. So, like this is one of the cat blocks where it's got
Oh, that's
the fussy cut
pretty.
in there, and then let me see if I can. Here's one that has both. So, like this one has it's and dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs are in the rectangles of the
Yeah.
points there. And so each one had like a different skill about what you were learning from that one. Um, and so like one was stripes, one was putting things in directional, part of it was using freezer paper to do different things and how you can use all these different things besides just sewing the fabric. And it's made me appreciate directional prints even more, but then it's also kind of broken me and I can't look at things that like one of my projects right now, I have to have my like there's trees and because it was a jelly roll strip, I can't make my strip go the right direction. I have trees going in every direction
Yeah.
and I have to just accept that. And so it's kind of inspired and really pushed me to think about directional and really taking that time to get it in there right. But it's also kind of broken me a little bit to times that I can't fix it.
Yeah, I
So
understand
this has
that.
been one of my favorites. And then when it comes to backing, if I have to piece it and I don't want to deal with lining up things, I'll put an accent strip in there. And so because this one was fussy cutting, my accent strip became fussy cut squares.
Oh, nice.
So I went and took my two pieces of this art gallery fabric and with a strip of alternating of some of my favorite prints from the blocks. Kind of give it a little bit more
Great.
focal. And then I've got a couple more in this pile. I think this was also in 2018. It was the last year that Gnome Angel did the 100-day 100 block sampler on Instagram using Tula Pink's City Sampler book. And my cousin and I jumped in on it and to join it because we're like, let's do this. It sounds like fun. And it was a lot of fun. And I keep looking at my book wanting to do another one, but I had so much fun. Mine's very rainbowy and colorful.
Oh, it is
And
colorful. It's
I
pretty.
needed a quilt. I needed a quilt for my bed. I didn't have a quilt for my queen size bed at the time. That was actually made with the intention of that. And so I was like, this will be perfect. It'll fit. And then so I did kind of some blocks for specific people in my family. Like I made one for each of my family members. Like this one here was for my dad. He liked the color yellow. His cat Murphy at the time, and then he was a bike rider. My sister's had science stuff in there because she's a physics major. My mom's had sewing stuff, but then in the midst of everything, I found my fabric for my first quilt and I
Nice.
included it in my blocks. So I was
That's
able to fussy
awesome.
cut a little pig in there and include that as well. So this one has been well loved and washed, and I've already got binding that I need to put back on. But um, it has been great to have this to kind of look at as a little I Spy
Yeah.
quilt and kind of give some fun. And then, so when it comes to the Elizabeth Hartman evolution, this is the most recent one I have done. This is the
Oh,
cat
cute.
pajamas. So this is one of her newer patterns. And I decided I was going to make a pillow before I did the full quilt because I loved
Yeah.
the pattern, but I was like, I just want to make something quick. I just want to have something fun. So I decided I was going to make my cat Trixie. The pattern has this as like a solid here, but
Yeah.
she's got this little like widow's peak on her face. So I figured out how to get that in there, kind of just like make it my own and put her in some pink taco pajamas
Oh,
and
she's super cute.
I put zippers in the back of my pillows instead of doing the envelope
Yeah.
because I feel like it holds them better and it kind of keeps their shape a little bit more. And it's actually not as hard as it seems, but this is
Yeah.
also about the extent of my putting in zippers one of the things. So there is my super fun little
She's
kitty pillow that
cute.
lives on our
Oh my
couch.
goodness.
And
Oh,
then when we got married last year, I made two quilts that were kind of one was a surprise for the wedding, and then the other one was I wanted to make something to go on our card table, just to kind of dress it up a little bit. So I did this is the Vegas wedding quilt. So instead of being a traditional double wedding ring, it's all traditional piece. There's no curved seams or anything. And I did it all in our wedding colors. So our bridesmaids and our groomsmen all wore this like teal color. That was our main color. And then we had our flowers in the yellows and the rust color. And so it makes this big quilt. And it was to the point of I loved this quilt and I had seen it so many times online. I had forgotten I bought the pattern. And so I just nearly bought it again. And I found it in my Dropbox and then I just went and bought I went in with the intention to buy grunge to make this quilt, and there's not a single piece of grunge in this. So my grunge got outvoted that day, but this has some of the really pretty glisten. So the yellow and the teal actually has a little bit of shimmer to it, which kind
uh-huh.
of makes it fun. And this was my first time making a quilt that was done on point. So instead of assembling it in rows, it has you do it on point and then rotate to be square. You can trim it up. So that was my first time doing that, and it was actually really fun. And it wasn't as scary as it seemed
Yeah.
once getting everything all kind of visually on there, and I had to look at it like 6 times to make sure that I didn't flip a block somewhere in the middle that I wouldn't see until the very end. So that was that one. And then this one of our favorite shows is the show Parks and Rec with Amy Poehler. And in one of the episodes where she's engaged, she makes a unity quilt. Her thing is arts and crafts, and so she makes a unity quilt that's supposed to help unify the family and get her fiance's divorced parents to get along and all like each other. And chaos happens and everything. And so I was like, well, this is our favorite show. This is how we started talking to each other, was because of this show. And so I went ahead and I made our very own family unity quilt. And so these are all foundation paper piece blocks. And and so each one reflects a different person in the family, whether it's my father-in-law. This one is my husband with his golf. His mom's a newspaper writer. My mom likes cats and was born in February, so I did hers as purple. My dad bike rides. Mine's a sewing machine, and then even our little Trixie cat got her own block in there
He's
because
cute. Oh my
why
goodness.
not? And
Yeah.
so this was one of my crazy late night, like, I gotta do this, like, we're gonna make this happen. And so that was one of my last minute wedding things that I decided to do, and had a whole lot of fun doing it, and it turned out to be a great surprise. And now you can tell it's well loved. It's been washed a handful of times already and cat fur all over it, so it goes to good use. And then I think my last one that I have is my most recent finish, which is, it's not Elizabeth Hartman. This one's actually a Cluck Cluck sew pattern, which
Okay.
are also some of my favorite patterns. Um, I love how their patterns are, but it's cats. So
Oh, nice.
I did this one as a project when I went on my guild retreat earlier this year. And so this is the
Aw.
Cats in Pajamas fabric line. So this was one I had bought for the Fat Quarter bundle. I had gone back and forth, and then this pattern got announced. And she said, like, the biggest size takes 13 fat quarters. And there was exactly 13 fat quarters in this collection. And we happened to have one sitting around, and I was like, okay, I need that pattern. I need to figure out what background color I'm going to do. And so I chose the yellow just to kind of give it a little something different, kind of pop everything out a little bit. And then this was a case of, I started it in March and then didn't finish it until September because things kept happening. I sewed half of my pieces on wrong, so I had to go home and rip them out. And then my long arm went down for a week, so I couldn't quilt it. But then I got it all done and got its nice soft minky on the back. So
Beautiful.
this is kind of will be good for storybooks and reading and having picnics on or something. Just a good lay on the couch. I've already thrown it on the couch and kind of curled up under it a couple times now that it's finally cooler outside. And so those are kind of my collection of similar yet different quilts, and they've all been a blast to make and kind of helped me figure out my next journey for whatever my next couple quilts are going to be. But I feel like it's always fun to look back and remember like where you were at this point in time and making those quilts.
Oh, right. That was a cool trunk show. Okay, so now we'll get on with the fun part. What is your favorite guilty pleasure? And it does not have to relate to quilting.
I am a sucker for the show The Masked Singer. That's probably my guilty pleasure around here. Um, it's just I think I've snuck my husband into being into it as well. Um, just the fact of trying to guess the clues, and I'm not really into reality shows in general, but this one, my roommate and I years ago when it first came on started watching it and we got hooked, and I was like, hey, this is a really dumb premise for a show where celebrities are dressed in these elaborate costumes, but the clues and stuff and kind of making the guessing game along the way has been,
Oh,
it's just a
interesting.
sucker show.
Okay, what is your favorite quilting tool?
I find what do I use a lot? I've got this little, I call it a ninja star, but it's not. It's this it's I think it's called like a blade saver. This is probably the one I use the most currently because I'm doing a lot of chain piecing.
Hmm.
It's this little plastic thing, and you unscrew it, and it's got like these little like flower kind of petals, and you put your old rotary blades in it, and you pop it in the base, and you can just snap your little threads through it instead of having to cut with scissors each time.
Yep.
It's become my most used item right now.
Okay. What quilting item do you wish you had invented?
I mean, probably a seam ripper. Like nobody likes to use them, but the amount of those that probably get sold. Though I don't know if I would want to be responsible for that kind of a product. Like you invented that thing that makes us have to unsew things. That'd be a lot of pressure.
What would you like to do in the world of quilting that you have not done?
I want to travel more. Um, like I know there's a quilt museum or textile museum out here in the Bay Area that's not even that far from me, and I haven't gone there. I always enjoy going to different quilt shops when I do travel, and I think going to where like Paducah, where the big ones are, or like anywhere international, like Pacific International Quilt Festival isn't that far from me either. Like I I have no reason. I just have to do it. And it's just I don't know. Sometimes traveling alone is a little stressful and like wanting somebody to go with you, but then also wanting to just take things on and embrace them and at your own speed is kind of a pressure as well. So I definitely think travel. Someday I'll make it out to Quilt Town, USA. Um, that's my hope, at least.
What was your worst quilting disaster and were you able to resolve it?
So I almost grabbed this quilt out of the garage to show, but I think I'm still angry at it. I made my Christmas quilt. That was my whole inspiration for 26 and 21. It was an Alexander Henry fabric that I picked the backing first. And then I made the front based off of the backing. And last year, we had COVID all over again. And so I was like, okay, Christmas is over. I'm gonna wash the Christmas quilt. And so I washed it and then some of the fabric bled. And so I was like, well, what do I do? I tried color catchers, I tried all these other things. And then my mom had mentioned something that my sister had used for trying to get whites whiter, and that's what I thought it would do. I was like, okay, this will make the color like extra color come out because I was impatient and didn't want to wait for the other product to come. And I was like, well, we'll try this one first, and if that doesn't work, then we'll do this other thing. So I did it, and it bleached my quilt. So all the colors. My grunge border, it was a red border. It's now probably like an orange brown color. All the color came out of the grunge in the background that was like a bluish white. The backing, like the only thing I think that didn't get ruined and like bleached was my quilt label. And so there's that. That shout out to Ever Emblem for whatever they used for not going through that being bleached. But I was not able to fix it. And now that Alexander Henry is no longer printing fabric anymore, to my understanding, I don't know what I'm going to do. I would like to replicate it and redo it somehow. Maybe that'll be next year's Quiltmas. Maybe I'll be able to
Yeah.
emotionally embrace it and show off that quilt by that point and show what happened and then how I'm going to fix it, how I'm going to recreate it. But um, it still lives in the garage in the box that we put it in.
Yeah.
Uh,
So if you could watch any one quilt, who would it be in person?
I think I would watch Angela Walters. Um, I I'm not big on free motioning myself. Um, the movement, because I know she does, at least the videos that I watched when she did like the midnight quilt show and stuff, she does a lot on her domestic machine, and that movement of quilting just doesn't work in my brain for me.
Yeah.
I just can't get it to move at the pace that it needs to move at or feel like it's smoothly moving along. But her personality, I just really enjoy like watching those videos, and I think she'd be a good hang and kind of be able to ask questions. And I think she does some long arm stuff. So, and even if she didn't, I'd be like, hey, you want to show me how to do this since I'm hanging out with you? So,
If you weren't a quilter, what would you do?
I would probably, I'd probably still be in preschool, not me as a preschool student, but prior to COVID, that's what I was doing as I was preschool teaching. That's when my photography business wasn't quite taking off, I went back to
Mm.
school and did all the special education, not special education, early childhood education qualifications. So I would probably be in that field, whether in the just a regular classroom or going back and doing the stuff for special education.
Tell us something about yourself. Let me try that again. Tell us something about yourself that might surprise us.
Um, I know the big one that gets people when they see me in person is I am 5'11". I am tall. Um, I what else might surprise you? My other go-to as far as things that surprise people is I'm 36 and I still have two baby teeth. They're not coming out anytime
Interesting.
soon, so I am forever young, I guess, until those teeth come out. Yeah, I have no grown-up teeth that are gonna push them out of their way, so they're just hanging on in there and
I
keeping
had a
me young.
friend way back when who had two baby teeth that were on the bottom front, and she never
Huh.
had adult teeth that came in. It was always those two baby teeth.
Yeah, mine are in the top, and then I at least have two. My younger brother only has one that's mismatched, so I was like, at least I got a pair.
What is your favorite color and why?
Um, if you can guess by my wall and my hair, teal is my favorite color. I grew up when I was little, I was a pink and purple kind of girl. And then it kind of transformed over the years. I think I just like the cool and calming feeling of the like blues and greens and stuff. And then when it came to this house, I this wall was actually like it was brick color. They were like they're not real bricks. So don't come at me for painting my bricks. I already got that. And
I don't like
so
wood.
I was either gonna rip it out or paint over it. And
Yeah.
so people were like, "Oh, we'll do a whitewash or do this." And I was like, "I want a fun color." And so it came. I was like, "Hey, teal's gonna be my wall," and
Yeah, I think it looks lovely.
I think it's awesome. I I was anticipating hating this wall being here when I bought the house, and now I think this is going to be one of the things that I'm going to miss when we ever leave this place. I'm like, hey, how can we replicate my teal bricks in somewhere else?
Yep, exactly. What 5 skills should a beginner quilter learn about to help them become good quilt makers as they learn?
Let's see, 5 things. I feel like measure twice, cut once is
Okay.
definitely one. That was what happened with my kitty cat quilt. I sewed all my pieces on and trimmed them on the wrong side of my project. So there was no way I could go back until going home to get my scraps. Um, I would say try new things. Don't be afraid to try new things. Um, the other one that I heard recently was there was somebody sitting across from me at a retreat, and they said when they teach people how to sew, they tell them don't worry about like if it says it's beginner, intermediate, or advanced. If it's something that you want to make and something that makes you feel happy, don't worry about that. Like you'll learn along the way of how to get those skills. And I think don't be afraid to try anything that's allegedly out of your range because
Yep.
you may not, don't limit yourself. And then don't, hold on, get a lot of don'ts. So
It's okay if you say don't.
I know I'm trying to think. I was like, what is there? Any other don'ts? Any other do's? I would say another one would be don't be afraid to put yourself out there because I feel like I see a lot of people that have their projects and um don't feel like they're good enough to share them, but I feel like show and tell is half of the fun and half of the experience to building
Yeah,
community and getting to know other quilters and for me like I'm very much like a I'll go to retreats, but often I'll sit there because I'm more of a listener than like a conversation. But I feel like just listening in on some of those conversations and like showing what you're working on can help think of ideas that you didn't have yourself or inspire others that wouldn't even thought to do something your way
yeah.
because somebody who has like 30 years of experience may not be familiar with what your 6 months might have heard just by researching.
We need one more.
One more. Okay. Enjoy it. Like, don't let it stress you out. Um, I know sometimes, like especially when I was preschool teaching, I was I was sewing, but it wasn't as the level that I am now. But it was still my like stress relief. Like it's what I went home because I was sometimes preschool can be crazy with 3 and 4 year
Yeah,
olds. And so just having something to be an outlet and something enjoyable. And like if a project wasn't making me happy that day, then that project was going to go sit in timeout and I was going to pick something that did make me happy that day.
yeah. Okay, so suggest 5 tools that every quilt maker should start out with and why.
A good pair of scissors. I have ties I really like. And then I have a pair of dingers that are also fantastic. Feel like I can cut through anything with those. Um, a way, the things that I am terrible at, a way to organize your thread, like just something to keep it all contained. Like I'm looking around my room going, well, most of my threads contain, and then I'll see like an army of thread over here and an army of thread over there, and they're just all over the place.
Yep.
So something to keep your thread organized that makes sense to you. It doesn't have to be a fancy thread rack or something like that. Like mine's just the thread that is where it should be is in it's these drawers that I got from like the bathroom organization section of Target. Like it's not even a sewing product.
Hmm.
It's just my thread fits perfectly in there for my long arm and there it is. I think as much as I don't use pins, having pins on hand, um, the longer ones I feel like are better for quilting because you're going to be able to hold on to more. And even if you don't use them for piecing, as if you can label your pieces, like with the Elizabeth Hartman ones, having some way to label those makes a world of difference. Keeping things organized. Um, let's see what else. What else the new sewer did I want to have? Hmm. I find that the art gallery boxes, like as you find yourself as a new quilter, it's hard to say no to just one project.
Hmm.
Um, and finding a way to keep those projects all in their homes is its own adventure. And so those art gallery bins, if you're especially if you're small on space, how they stack up. I actually have one that is a scrapbooking rack. So
Yeah.
it's on wheels and it's got boxes that clamp close so I can keep my projects in there with their patterns and everything that I need. So then whether it's the next week or the next year that I get back to that project, everything is in that box and ready to go. So organization is key. And then I feel like I need one more best press. I have learned to love best press. It's come in handy. Um, and just ironing fabric. Um, and also on the base of here's bonus one. I would say a good iron. It doesn't have to be a fancy iron. Like my favorite iron that I use right now is a Black& Decker iron from Walmart. Like it's $30, or at least it was at the time, and it heats up so well. I use a dry iron, but if I need anything steamed or anything, I'll either use the best press or I'll have a mister bottle that has just water in it. And
Yeah.
that iron has been dropped so many times and is still going strong.
Yep. I had the iron before the one I have now. I dropped it a lot, and it still lasted a long time. Okay. Let me see here. What's next? What advice would you give concerning how to take care of quilts to make them last a long time?
Um, so that's something that I'm still feeling out myself. I know I've heard like there's different ways to fold them that people have suggested. I know the main one that I make sure of is that if I'm storing a quilt, I'm not storing it in like direct sunlight. And then if they do get stored in the garage for whatever reason, my mom has always like for those kind of things put them inside a trash bag and then like tied off the trash bag to keep any like outside items, probably like bugs and stuff,
Yeah.
extra out if you're putting them in those kind of elements. So that's just from what I've seen done. So I know a lot of my quilts are not probably folded and cared for as they should be, but I want mine to last a long time, and so I need to do a little research more myself on
Yeah.
best tips and tricks for that.
What advice would you give to a beginner quilter?
Don't be afraid. Try the things, get the fabric that makes you happy, even if it's like ginormous Buzz Lightyear prints. If the fabric makes you happy, don't feel like um, you need to worry so much about quality. Like I know box store stuff isn't going to be your standard quilt shop quality, but if that's what's in your budget and that's what makes you happy right now, if it gets you sewing, then treat yourself. Do it.
Okay, and this is the last question. What advice would you give to any quilter?
Just share your work. I my Instagram, when I first got onto Instagram, it was in a lot of quilty stuff, and now maybe it's people aren't sharing as much, or maybe my feed is all wonky, but that's just what makes me happy. I love scrolling through Instagram and seeing people sharing their work or what they're working on, or whether it's a finished project or like I bought this jelly roll today and I'm cutting out this quilt today. Like I just want to see more community. I like being able to like comment, or even if I don't comment, like if I double tap and send you a heart, um, then I put more. That's more than I would do on any other thing. Like
Yeah.
I'm just wanting people to want the world to quilt together.
Yep. Putting a heart on something lets us know, or anyone know, that you're engaging, you're taking the time to at
Right.
least look, and you may not comment, but
That it,
you've been
yeah,
there
it caught
because
my
you
eye.
liked it or hearted it or whatever you did. And that lets people know
Mm-hmm.
you're there looking at their stuff instead of just bypass.
Yeah.
Because you never know. I'm sure people look at a lot of things, but we don't know if you've looked at something if there's no activation that we can
No
see.
response. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that concludes all of my questions. So, again, would you please tell us about your channel one more time and the name of your channel, along with if you have a web page, tell us about that also.
So my channel is Terribly Rad, and at this point, we're gearing up to get into Quiltmas 2024. And so those videos will be coming real soon, but I don't have a website just yet. Well, it's coming. It's quiltingbyemily.com. And that's where, when we get long arm stuff going, that's where you're going to find all the goodies. And I'm also on Instagram at We're Rad, WERE, Let's Hug. So We're Rad, Let's Hug is my Instagram handle. And you can also find me on there under Quilting by Emily is coming soon as well. And if you love cat pictures and cats on quilts, you can follow Trixie herself on there at Trixie Beast.
Okay, that's great. So thank you everyone for coming and watching the premiere of my podcast interview with Emily. And I hope you enjoyed it. And make sure to go over to her YouTube channel and subscribe to her channel, become a member, and also view some of her videos and like them and comment on them and just let her know that you've been there to see her videos so that she knows you have. So again, thank you for coming to my podcast interview, Emily. I appreciate it and I've enjoyed learning more about you. And make sure all of y'all live, laugh, love, dream. And what do you do with all of that? You create something. So have a great evening and see you on the next video. Bye, everyone.